I'll show you something good. Oh, I'll show you something good. When you open your mind, you'll discover the sign that there's something you're longing to find. The miracle of love will take away your pain. When the miracle of love comes your way again. Cruel is the night that covers up your fears. Tender is the one that wipes away your tears. There must be a bitter breeze to make you sting so viciously. They say the greatest coward can hurt the most ferociously. But I'll show you something good. Oh, I'll show you something good. When you open your heart, you can make a new start. When your crumbling world falls apart. The miracle of love will take away your pain. When the miracle of love comes your way again. The miracle of love will take away your pain. When the miracle of love comes your way again. Hey, when it comes, let it come. When it comes, let it come right down on me. Woo, woo, the miracle of love comes your way again and again and again and again and again.
Well, skrillions of Annie Lennox fans all over the world would be applauding, I would say, as we speak. Wonderful stuff from Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart. And before that, just to reveal a not the font of all knowledge, referring to the notes, Ali Bain was that beautiful Scottish folk music that you heard, and she's one of the biggest names in traditional Scottish folk music. Speaking of big names, HG and Roy, are you there?
We certainly are, George, and absolutely delighted to be locking horns with you again on this fantastic night. Roy, the atmosphere across Sydney is really building. Since we last spoke to George, what have you noticed? How's Sydney been coping with New Year's Eve?
Well, actually, it's just been fantastic. We had house dance, of course, performing on the side of the Opera House here, the western wall of the Opera House. And that image fused with Stonehenge. I don't know, I don't quite see the relationship, but it worked for mine. It really grabbed the heart. It was tremendous. And what it does show is, especially in the context of Annie Lennox there, is that Sydney-siders know how to party. Australians know how to party. And Sydney's certainly letting its hair down now as we're going to hear Denny Hines. Yes, you heard it here first. Denny Hines is performing just here behind us. So there's plenty of room. If you want to get down to the Sydney Opera House, come on down now.
And of course, you know, let's be quite honest. I mean, Sydney-siders and Sydney people can walk on the sides of buildings. A lot bloody better than Annie Lennox can stand on the spot and just burble away. I mean, get it in perspective, George. I mean, this is Australia, this is Sydney, this is New Year's Eve. And Roy, coming to your list now, I know you've been working on a list. Look, I don't want to reveal too much. What is your next top 5 list?
Well, for those at home, HG, still playing lists, the top 5 ports in Australia. I've got Port Augusta, Port Pirie, Port Stephens, Port Douglas and Port Macquarie. The talking point is Port Kembla.
Yes, left out. And, of course, we've got another toast. And this time it's a toast to Australia. Roy, in 25 words or less, can you give us the toast to Australia?
Here's to Australia. You bloody beauty. You're doing really well. Full marks.
And that's the same for you, George. You're holding it together in magnificent style. Australia, stand up and toast yourselves.
I told you there'd be something about being sent up. More Roy and HG Millennium Madness down in Sydney Harbour later. But now, another look at what's going on around the country. First to Karina Lester at Uluru. Karina, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, George. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. I can tell you that the rest of the world is looking forward very much to what you've got coming to us from Uluru. It's one place like Sydney Harbour and the Opera House that the rest of the world really wants to see. How are things going?
Things are going fantastic here, George. We've had a lovely evening. We've listened and watched some of the Inma, what we call Inma, which is traditional dance, and that's been coming live here, and it's been a great turnout, and it's a lovely evening. We couldn't ask for anything better.
Can I ask you this? I mean, what do 2,000 years mean to your people who have probably been around for 50,000, maybe even more?
Well, it's a very important time for all of us, and what we call ourselves our animals. So it's a big get-together, an opportunity to get all the culture and all the singing and the dancing all happening together. So it's a wonderful evening tonight.
Yep, well, we're looking forward to what is going to happen later. Can you give us a bit of an outline of what we can expect from the Rock, from Uluru?
Absolutely, George. We had Inma, which is the traditional dance, earlier on, and we'll be having 2 contemporary dance groups coming as well. We'll have stalkers performing, so I've got a great lineup for the evening.
Karina, thanks very much. And as I said, and I really mean it because I was at the meeting that was involved, people really all over the world are looking forward to what's coming to us from Uluru. So please tell everyone there, we and the rest of the world are looking forward greatly to what they've got to offer.
Absolutely, George. I'll let everyone know, and thanks again. All the best.
Thanks, Karina, at Uluru. And it's true, the world is looking forward to what they've got to offer us. And now to Christine Ahern in Hobart. Good evening, Christine.
Hi, George. Yes, Hobart's docks are continuing to build. Yachties are out on their boats, both moored at the docks and out on the river, in what is a beautiful Hobart night, but a very cold one as well.
It's good to know the weather's okay there, Christine, because it hasn't been so bright in the rest of the East Coast.
No, it is a very beautiful night. Yachties are enjoying it out on the river. They've got a great view, and we're just actually having the lantern parade through the street, through Hobart's waterfront. And what it is 50 school children from southern Tasmania have made their lanterns, each carrying a message of hope for the year 2000.
It's interesting, isn't it, that it should be Hobart who gets the 2000 sun first? Because, in fact, because of the curvature of the Earth, you, in fact, get it before even Byron Bay.
That's right, and I hear it's going to be a very cold morning up Mount Wellington, but that's not stopping anyone. And these kids will make their way up Mount Wellington at 4:30 a.m. Obviously, they won't walk the whole way up. That won't be very enjoyable for them. They'll make their way about 400 metres from the summit, and they'll be up there to see the sun come up, the first place in Australia in the new millennium.
Thanks very much, Christine. We'll talk to you again. Thanks again.
Thanks, George.
And now to Derek Gill in Melbourne. Derek, how are things going on the Yarra?
Oh, George, the atmosphere of the Yarra here is just building up incredibly with midnight just over an hour away. The huge crowd on the Yarra Bank is about to be entertained by Aurora Australis. Can you hear me? It's a choir comprised of members of a large number of local cultural organisations, and meanwhile in the Alexandra Gardens a flotilla of hot air balloons, the largest number of these craft ever assembled in Melbourne, is preparing to thrill the city with a balloon nightglow.
And now Richard Marketson in Adelaide. Richard.
George, what a pleasure it is to be here at Click, the Millennium event in Victoria Square. We're currently being regaled with the Queens of Adelaide, the old Queens right in the centre of Victoria Square, and round her skirt dances 2 other Queens. Knee-high puppet company have built 6.5-metre effigies that seem to be courting their namesake amidst thousands of revelling South Australians. The puppets are nearly as high as the street lights, and this is one of the events that's taken place here over the last couple of hours. 6 stages, everything from samba dancing to orchestras. But here we have the Queens dancing around. Under their skirts, if you have a quick look, you might find a forklift driver. The whole thing's being run by forklifts, and they're doing a little bit of blind dancing. Lots of flashing lights, lots of music, and I think Adelaide kicking into the celebrations here as the millennium draws close. Lots of waltzing and boogieing.
Thanks a lot, Richard. And in about, we've got an hour and a quarter to go, as the countdown would tell us. Well, as we said earlier, we're off to Spain right now in a small village, if I get the pronunciation correct, of Cunfranc, high in the Pyrenees, where an abandoned train station, would you believe, has been transformed into a stage. What you can see now are more than 30 performers known as, and again, apologies for the pronunciation, my Spanish is only marginally better than my English, or marginally worse than my English, Els Comediants. People that we know perform so brilliantly at the Barcelona Olympics. Their work symbolises the end of the last millennium and celebrates the arrival of the new one.
ABC. And welcome and bienvenido. 2000.
Frank in Spain, and the significance, of course, of that location, I shouldn't say of course, I only just discovered it myself, is that the zero meridian, which passes through Greenwich, also passes through Frank, which is why they selected that amazing railway station as a location for that spectacular bit of dancing. There must be in at the moment throughout the world to have people hanging from things. Just right now, though, a quick recap on a couple of the big international stories breaking news tonight. Russian President, as we told you earlier, Boris Yeltsin has quit. He ceded power to Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. Yeltsin said it was time to hand over to a new generation, and what a day and a night he picked to do that. And of course, now, you may have heard elsewhere, but we can tell you here now that the hijack drama in Afghanistan appears to be over. India has agreed to free 3 Muslim militants in return for the release of the 160 people on board the Indian Airlines jet. The plane's currently, we hear, on the tarmac, still in the southern Afghani city of Kandahar, from where our correspondent Tim Lester joins me on the phone. Tim, are we correct?
George, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Yes, you are correct, in as much as about 10 minutes ago, a convoy of about 9 vehicles sped from the Indian Foreign Minister's jet that had landed moments earlier here at Kandahar to the Indian Airlines Airbus that's been on the tarmac for about 7 days now. There was a ladder placed at the front of the jet down which the 5 hijackers climbed. There was a short discussion that took place under the Airbus. Then one of the hijackers went back up the ladder, threw down some baggage to the others below. They were placed in a car in a convoy of 4 vehicles. They then sped away up to the northern end of the airport and disappeared. As yet, no passengers have emerged from the Indian Airlines jet. There's a crowd of Taliban officials and Indian officials around the Indian Airlines jet as I speak. It appears, as you've said, that the hijacking is over, and we would hope to see the 150 or so hostages free from this jet any minute now.
Tim, what's the explanation, if there is one at this point, for the sudden change of heart by the hijackers, or how do you explain the fact that it's now over when it seemed to be totally stalemated for so long?
It certainly was stalemated for a great length of time. I guess in the hijackers' mind was that their hosts, effectively, the Taliban, were losing patience with this episode, and it demanded that this had to be solved by today. Otherwise, the Indian Airlines jet would be forced to leave, if indeed they could have forced it to leave Kandahar Airport. The hijackers then had nowhere effectively to take this jet. There was nowhere left for them to go. They did have on offer from the Indian Foreign Minister the release of 3 Kashmiri militants, including the man that they'd set out initially to have released. So in that sense, they felt they'd achieved, no doubt, a fairly considerable concession from the authorities, and that they should therefore cut their losses. For the Indian government, this is a loss of face. They've had to give in to the extent that they've had to surrender 3 militants to the hijackers, as we understand. But it was a compromise that appears, at least, to have ended this crisis.
Yeah, I guess it's a question, Tim, isn't it? A choice between loss of face or loss of life in this situation. Any idea of the condition of the 150, 160 people still on board, as you say?
We don't know yet, George. That will become too, as those people are able to tell their stories and that authorities get in and get a proper inspection of the jet. We do know that its auxiliary power system failed overnight. It's been on the tarmac, as we've said, for 7 days. Conditions in there must have been fairly dreadful. Yeah,
what about the Australian? Mr. Ward, the man with the epileptic problem, any idea of his condition, his state?
We don't know. Apparently the first 3 hostages, we've just been told, have been released from the... the 3 people demanded by the hijackers have been released. In terms of the condition of the hostages, we're still unsure, because they are still on board the jet, although one would expect that we begin to see them any time.
How would you describe the way the Taliban government have handled this, Tim?
Well, the Taliban government have won themselves considerable kudos for their management of this, and in fact, the Taliban's foreign minister said as much only a couple of hours ago, when he intimated that the world had long considered them and their role in Afghanistan as the assisters of international terrorism. They're now playing up their role as the ones who've maintained a cool head in this, have facilitated the end of the crisis, and certainly earlier today they were looking pretty pleased about their role in what's happened.
Well, thanks for that, Tim. I guess it's not the place that you wanted to be on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, but it's good that you've been able to come to us the way you have with good news, not bad news, of that dreadful situation that's dragged on now, as you say, for 10 days.
Indeed, indeed.
Tim, thanks very much for that. It's been a marvellous addition to the program to be able to let people know that hostage crisis is in fact over. Tim Lester in Afghanistan, and thank goodness the crisis is over there. And now some good news from New Zealand as well. The country, for those of you who've been worried about the dreaded bug, the country seems to have escaped the Millennium bug. New Zealanders were among the first to see the new century. At this early stage, there appear to be no problems. And the Y2K situation is being watched very carefully here in Australia by the National Coordination Centre in Canberra. So we'll go there right now to Sarah Clark, who's at the centre as we speak. Sarah, how are things going there? We've just heard that New Zealanders have had no problems. That's what they're telling us anyway.
Well, at this stage, it sounds like you may have heard more than us. We're still waiting on some kind of report. They're expecting a full report, I imagine, within the next hour or so, and then they can assess how New Zealand has gone. But at this stage, no reports, actually official reports, through to the emergency centre. Because
what we don't know, Sarah, everybody's got their fingers crossed behind their backs, I suspect, while their New Year faces are smiling, whether we're looking at something which is going to cause minor problems around the world or the end of civilisation as we know it. What are the boffins, as HG and Roy have been describing them in Canberra, saying? What do they think the extent of the problem might be in Australia and internationally?
Well, look, basically, at this stage, the line from the government has been for probably the last month or so that there could be some minor problems, but the minor problems will only be inconvenience. The government spent a lot of money, I gather, around $530 million across Commonwealth agencies over the last little while, getting rid of the Y2K bug. So it seems it should be minor problems at this stage.
Sarah, we'll leave it there, but no doubt we'll come back and talk to you later when the midnight hour arrives.
Look forward to it.
Sarah Clark, watching the Y2K Millennium bug movement in Canberra. Well, there's just over an hour now until midnight in Tasmania, the ACT, Victoria and New South Wales. But before that, highlights of what's been going on around the world. Well, let's have a look at the countdown clock here in Australia. According to my clock, which is hardly ever correct, we're getting pretty close to 11 p.m. Yes, there we are. What have we got there? It's now estimated that the year just over an hour in Sydney and Hobart and Melbourne. And half an hour more in South Australia, as you know, and West Australia, of course, another 3 hours. Another 3 hours more than Sydney, not another 2.5 hours more than Adelaide. So we're getting there. As we said, the sun and ourselves, as a television broadcast, moving further and further west as we go. Halfway around the globe, more or less, you could say. It's 7 a.m. in New York's Times Square. Every year, all American eyes are on the so-called Times Square ball, which slides down the 25-metre flagpole on the stroke of midnight to mark the new year. They've got a new ball this year, and we're about to witness its maiden voyage up the pole. You've been seeing, obviously Charlotte Church you saw earlier from the UK, and Big Ben, and the 200-gun salvo. We've just seen the first tee shot, would you believe, in New Zealand, and obviously here, the first nuptials of the year 2000 in New Zealand. Wouldn't you love to have your wedding shown to the entire globe? Oh, isn't that sweet? Not a dry eye in the world. Hello. The time ball. And I can't tell you where that is. Maybe some of my colleagues can assist me. Oh, they're very accurate. Somewhere in New Zealand.
Five, four, three, two, one, screamer!
Guess what? The first bungee jump of the year 2000. Small beer compared to what we've been seeing on the Sydney Opera House sales, I would have thought. Oh, no, I'm impressed. No, thank you. Sitting in this studio will be the most risky thing that I do, I'm afraid, this evening. In the year 1999 and the year 2000. Where the hell is he? somewhere in New Zealand.
Fucking tops. That was really, really something.
And I'm glad he enjoyed it. And this is the first. Wait for it. You'll probably guess before I do. The first snow of the year 2000, somebody tells me. And the first photograph? No? The first funny hat, somebody said, of the year 2000.
Cheers.
I think that's correct. One of my colleagues tells me they're happy that the Y2K bug hasn't struck.
Kia ora and good morning and welcome to Wellington, New Zealand, where we're now in the 21st century, an hour into the year 2000. Now, behind me is Parliament Buildings, where the country's Y2K Readiness Commission is based. It held a media conference a short time ago and said there have been no reports of any difficulties with our major essential services in New Zealand. That was not unexpected, but officials say it's not over yet, and people in New Zealand should expect some localised disruptions over the coming weeks. This is Sarah Hall, Wellington, New Zealand.
Thanks for the countdown, boys.
And no Y2K problems in New Zealand.
Well, that was reassuring.
If we have problems and they don't, we're in big trouble. We'll send HG and Roy over, I think. Joining me now in the studio is Maxine McHugh, needing no real introduction at all. I've been feeling particularly lonely here. I'm glad you've arrived.
Well, you've had a lot of friends around the globe, George, I must say.
I hope so. What do you think? I mean, it's very hard to tell.
It's been looking good. It's been looking good. I like the Spanish conquistadors. I thought that was a nice touch, you know, going back 500 years or so, recalling their glory.
What struck you? What struck you as being outstanding?
Oh, particularly that, actually. I thought that was a great show.
Well, what about the Opera House? I mean, a lot of the stuff has been pretty marvellous, but that was much better than I expected from the sales.
Terrific.
That was fantastic.
And considering the weather, I mean, as I drove in to the studio tonight, the weather was, the winds was blowing a gale.
Fine in here.
Yeah.
Fine in here.
No, well, actually, it's a bit dry in here, I'd have to say. I mean, I'm looking around. It's supposed to be a party.
Well,
Where are the drinks?
Apart from anything else, this is an alcohol-free zone. At the moment. We may change that later on.
I was going to say, George,
Between us,
on.
we will assert some
Fresh from
pressure.
Italy. I mean, this is...
Yeah, no, it's a marvellous thing. As I said at the outset, the sun is moving west, the program is moving west, and we're probably the next cab off the rank.
Great flavour of what's happening around the place.
Yes. Well, it's good to have Maxine with us. And now as the nation gears up for 2000, some of the evening's highlights from around Australia.
I think we need to take lessons from them in the new year.
Oh, goodness. I've been terribly impressed by the stuff that's come from the Opera House. I mean, I know HG and Roy are, and they're closer to the action than you and I.
That's right. And,
why don't you...
And very acrobatically adept, I would have thought.
HG and Roy.
That'd be right, wouldn't it?
2,000 today, and I, like you, Maxine, am a time ball freak. I just can't get enough of those time balls. Have a look at this one here. It goes up like this, and then you get to a point and it just drops down like that.
Technology's wonderful, isn't it?
I don't know what more the public of the world want. However, I would like to see the first fish hooked in the new millennium. Sure, it's all right to have a bloody tee shot off a golf course and have, you know, obviously the first person at an automatic telemachine, but how about the first fish hooked? That's the thing I'm waiting for, and I'm hoping that a Sydney personality or an East Coast personality in Australia could do that. Could it be Rex Hunt, Don Lane, one of the big names, maybe Bert Newton, somebody like that. Should be on standby with a fish and a bit of bait, cast it in at 12 EST and pull it in, or should I say ESST, summertime. But Roy, we've got news from Christchurch Hospital in New Zealand that the first kitty has been born in the new millennium. His name is Adam Cairns. Adam Cairns is the first kid born in the new millennium. Roy, what sort of pressures will be placed on young Adam?
Yes, that's a good point, isn't it, actually? I always feel sorry for the kiddie born a minute or a second before midnight, so that their forehead is stamped 1999, because it's last year's model, and that's going to haunt the parents for the rest of their lives. Had they just been a little bit more careful last March, it might have been a little bit different. But congratulations to Adam Cairns, and I hope there's not too much pressure on this kiddie, because his life is going to be followed every minute of every day for the rest of his life. Everything's going to be measured against Adam Cairns. You know, how's the economy going, you know, in the year 2020? Well, let's have a look at Adam Cairns and see how he's kicked on. I don't envy the future of that kiddie, I must say. But I agree in a sense with Maxine and with George at the fabulous celebrations we've been seeing coming in around the world here on 2000 Today. But having said that, he said, going for the other camera, which doesn't, now it's working. Having said that, I'm disappointed, because doesn't the rest of the world know how to party? I mean, just a couple of guns going off without blokes or people behind them. I mean, it's very ordinary for mine. Here in Australia, we know how to party. Look at the scenes happening here behind us. It's just chaos. It's bedlam. That's how the world should be. Not, you know, lamenting the loss of Boris Yeltsin, who's retired, I'm led to believe, a few moments ago. It should be kicking the heels up, celebrating Adam Cairns, celebrating the third millennium as it's screaming at us.
Look, what disappointed me about those guns was, which we saw from England a little while ago.
Yes. Dull guns.
Dull guns.
Dull guns.
They didn't have anybody loading them, but they didn't appear to be aimed at anybody.
No.
And that was the disappointing part about it. There was nothing out there for them to shoot at.
Doesn't the rest of the world care?
And who cares?
Is the rest of the world asleep?
Who cares about Times Square or, you know, Big Ben going off in the middle of the bloody day?
Or the stock exchange in Wellington.
It's the middle of the night that matters. And surely, if it's good enough to come to New Zealand, Fiji, Tonga, Kiribati to celebrate the 12th hour of the night, midnight, what on earth are we doing celebrating the middle of the bloody day? Yes. They've got 12 hours to go, Roy.
Yes, they've got 12 hours to go.
But coming to your point, I think it's absolutely pertinent to say that Australia knows how to party, Australian people know how to party, and we are once again showing that we have the stars of today, yesterday and tomorrow, i.e. third millennium people, right here on the droop, on the drop, on the flop, on the tug, on the fiddle, on the grope, already in action going forward.
I agree.
Now, Roy, your list. What list have you got for
Well, I've got a very attractive and interesting list, I think, for the people of the world, and that is the top 5 Australian states.
Yeah.
Now, my list is this. Victoria, New South Wales, Tasmania, South Australia, Western Australia. The talking point...
Yes, Queensland.
Queensland, yes. But your list at home might be a little bit different to ours. Join in. It's abclists.com.au. Get involved.
And why is Queensland the talking point, Roy?
Well, I left it out.
And so now we come to another toast.
Yes.
And Maxine, George, Australia, we'd like you to charge your glasses and be upstanding for young Adam Cairns. What a marvellous personality he's going to be in the future.
All the
his
best,
own
Adam.
show, his own fishing rod, his own boat, his own time ball.
Fella, I'd charge a glass if I had one.
Exactly. But such profundity and perspective is what these blokes are adding to the whole
Mind
thing.
you, I would have to say, and Roy and HG, if you're still listening, I mean, Boris can't kick up his heels because I suspect he's probably falling over at this stage, you know? I was reminded that great line, I think, when Calvin Coolidge died, Dorothy Parker was reported to have said, how could they tell?
Yes,
The same with Boris resigning. How could they tell? What's he been doing recently?
Or on New Year's Eve, how could you tell Boris was drunk?
You're watching 2000 Today.
talk about food in Australia in the new millennium because it is simply so fantastic. There is no question that there is wonderful food available and that it has continually improved over the last 40 years. The most pivotal influence on the development of good food in Australia, without question, has been our migration. We've been through Balkan migration, Southern European migration, Asian, Southeast Asian migration, Middle Eastern migration, and all of those people have brought really important influences and, of course, have grown or produced foods themselves, and we're very fortunate to experience all of it. As life becomes more complex, I think there's a danger that people decide that they can't possibly find the time to spend in the kitchen. I think in the new millennium we will again see more and more people eating on the run, eating alone, buying takeout meals. That's one thing. I hope we will also see the groundswell of interest in preparing your own food and enjoying the fantastic raw ingredients we have in this country. My mother was a total inspiration to me in almost everything to do with my food life, and I would like to see for other young Australians that their food life is enhanced by sitting at the kitchen table with their mother and father and helping, and I think it's the helping and the shopping, the picking, the gathering, the preparing, the tasting, and finally all eating together. And even if you can't do it every day, you organise it as a priority for some times during the week. I think good food is the sort of daily pleasure that everybody is able to put into their lives and should give them enormous joy.
Well, George has just taken off to find some champagne, but in the meantime, I think we'll now go to Adelaide, where Richard Margetson brings us the latest from the South Australian capital. So, Richard, how's it looking down there?
Everything is going extremely well, thank you very much, Maxine. I'm standing in front of the fire stage here, which you can see the fire dragon over my shoulder, and on the stage also the Pakya dancers, who are an Indigenous dance troupe. 4 stages here: earth, air, water and fire. I was going to say wind, it's air and water and fire. And just on the fire stage also, we're just got the dancing, and it's just been absolute mayhem. Oh dear, I'm being shot in the face by the crowd. This is what it's like.
Richard, I gather Click is this big celebration with direct links to sites elsewhere. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually all linked up by the internet. 16 regional centres are actually linking in from all across South Australia. We've actually got some vision of some of the internet images that were coming to us earlier in the day. We start off with one from Kingscote from Kangaroo Island. This is them warming up for their Millennium event, their Click Millennium event. Also the Flinders Ranges, horse racing, very outback and very Australiana, right on the edge of the Millennium. And to finish up, we look at Ceduna, which is beautiful sunset way out west, and so the sunset is coming down in Ceduna probably a few hours ago. Here it's well and truly dark, and as you can tell, the celebrations are well and truly in full swing. Let's have a look at some of the things that happened earlier this evening. Are we done?
To be dancing with our children the last day of 1999, maintaining culture, taking culture with us into the year 2000.
So there we are, Maxine, some of the scenes from Click the Millennium event. Hopefully you'll come back and join us as the Time Tower comes to its conclusion at our midnight, which of course for Eastern States is a little bit later than you've had your midnight, but we look forward to catching up with you then.
Richard, we will certainly be coming back to you. We haven't quite got to our midnight yet, but things are getting pretty close. From the ABC, this, of course, is 2000 Today. And over the next 23 hours, we are bringing you the excitement, the celebrations and the suspense of the arrival of the year 2000. Well, joining me now from Brisbane is Peter Lewis. Peter, I understand the action up there tonight in Brisbane centres on South Bank.
It is, Maxine, as you'll probably recall, South Bank's undertaken some amazing changes over the past 10 years. And one of them, of course, is the construction of a man-made beach right here in the middle of town. It's been 32 degrees up here today in Brisbane, so this is probably one of the best places to be.
About how many people are there at the moment, Peter? How many have gathered?
Well, the estimates are that between 150 and 200,000 could be here in South Bank, and up to 500,000 in the downtown city area altogether. The crowds have been coming in fairly steadily for the last few hours or so. It's pretty quiet behind me, but right along the river is where everybody's taken up the vantage points to get a good look at the fireworks displays at midnight. So it's a bit hard to tell, but it's a very good turnout. It's a very mild night here in Brisbane, and a good night for partying. As you well know, Queenslanders like a party.
Absolutely. Good to see the spirit of revelry in my hometown of Brisbane. Peter, thanks very much. We'll be coming back to you, because Brisbane, not being on Eastern Standard Time, the midnight will be 1 hour later. Well, we go now to one of our tape specials. You're watching 2000 Today.
I've spent about 4 years living in Europe, and when I talk with Europeans, a question that I often get is, where do you come from? And I would say, I'm Australian, mate. And very often a reply to that would be, oh, you know, you don't look very Australian. Are you sure you're not Japanese? Never managed to find a satisfactory response to that. But what that's all about is, what does it mean to be Australian, or what does it mean to be a member of any nation now? You know, what does an Australian look like? What are the things that bind us together? So this is about the inclusive Australian identity. Being Australian or being part of any nation has nothing to do with the way that you look or what race you come from, but what's in your heart and what you can contribute to that society. In terms of the Australian population, we come from all four corners of the world. Some 50% of our population are either born overseas or have a parent born overseas. As we go into the next century and the next millennium, I think the greatest challenge for Australia is to redefine what it means to be Australian, to redefine what Australian cultural identity is. I mean, a lot of things can stay. The chesty bond singlets, the drover with the dog called Blue, the dry as a blown coat and the Akubra hat, all of that stuff can stay. But who's wearing it and what that person looks like, what colour their eyes are, what colour their hair is, that's got to be inclusive of people from all different backgrounds, and I think that's the greatest challenge. And if we can get that right, and it's linked up with all the issues that we've been struggling with at this time, all the issues of the soul, the intangible things, reconciliation, an honest dealing with our past and where we came from, multiculturalism as an honest and brave statement of who we are as a people now, and the Republic as well in terms of where we're going with our country into the future. These are all issues of Australia's soul, and they're the millennium issues.
Jason Yatsen-Lee, who of course was such a star at last year's Constitutional Convention. No doubt an issue that we in Australia will be revisiting sometime in the new century. Well, of course, New Year is a time for resolutions, and we've recorded many from the greats and others around Australia. So let's go to the first of ours tonight.
What we're going to do now is our pyramid lanterns. We're going to make them out of sticks, go out into the bush, find some sticks, and then make them, and then do a parade. When we do our parade, we're going to put our dreams on the lantern, write in what we want for Horn Island, for the world, or for our family. You boys share it. Share it together.
Miss, can I use the sticky tape, please?
Yeah, right. You can.
Hold it. You, I go hold it, or you wrap it. You wrap it, I go hold it.
You have to do this one, yeah. No, you just wrap it. No, just wrap it.
Why not the too long stick?
My dream is to be a singer, and the song I like is R&B. I would dream of making big shops on Island, so we don't have to travel down to South, down to Kent and that.
What I would like for Horn Island is a big cinema.
Big building. My dream is for world peace, because no more world wars will happen again. And basketball court.
My dream is like a dancing theater on Horn Island where people get chosen to dance.
You're watching 2000 Today, an event which is bringing together over 60 countries around the world. Well, it's an interesting fact that many of the events marking the new year here in Australia and overseas centre on fundamental elements of our environment: fire, water, ice and stone. And it's a theme you'll see repeated many times over the coming 23 hours or so. Well, in Melbourne tonight, Victorians plan festivities to rival those in Sydney or any of the other big capitals. Fire is the central theme of one of the many special events on the banks of the Yarra. And joining me now is Derek Gill. How are things going there, Derek?
Good evening. Things are fabulous here, Maxine. As you can hear, the crowd's going off, I think is the right way to describe it. And actually, everyone's getting ready for the next element of our Millennium Resolutions project. For the last couple of weeks, Melburnians have been writing on little bits of paper, little squares of red paper. We've been writing down those things that we want to leave behind in the old millennium. Those hurtful, hateful and harmful things that we want to leave behind us. On squares of white paper, our dreams, desires and aspirations for the new millennium. Now, these dreams are being attached to thousands of